Hello, hello, and welcome back to our podcast, Digitally Transformed. I'm your host, Melissa. Today, I am replaying our live webinar that we just had last week with some of my awesome teammates, Jeff Wilhelm, Connor O'Neill, John Dodd, Brad Mitchell, and myself. We talk all about the importance of data-driven marketing. We get into why data and analytics are so important to a modern business. We talk about the value of a 360-degree customer profile. We then get into the nitty-gritty of technologies that help enable these things and these data-driven decisions. And of course, at the end, we talk about how you can get started. I hope that you enjoy this episode. It's a good one. I'll go ahead and play it for you.
It's been known as direct marketing for a while, when you can actually identify a segment or a target group to reach out to. The difference that we have now is that we have so much information and we have so many people that you can't be reached through traditional advertising. 25 years ago or more, there was 3 channels. Now there's 300 channels. If you watch something on television, you might record it and skip through the advertisements. Fewer and fewer people are reading magazines and newspapers, right? But they're connected through communication more than they ever were before. So people are online, and so there is a way to get your message out to those folks and actually get it more targeted. And that's really what data-driven analytics is to identify those people or those groups, get the right message in front of them, and give them the opportunity to buy your product or service or to respond in some manner. The data aspect for a business really drives a number of different things besides direct marketing. Product development, just understanding more of what customer needs are, or what they're asking for, how you can get that type of information. So we're logging more and more information about what our customers that we've done traditionally, which has been primarily transactions. Now we understand their needs better. It helps us in cross-sell, upsell activity. We also get a better understanding of why people move on to another product or another company, right? And that helps us do loyalty programs so we can reach out and try to solve those problems before they basically result in someone leaving the business. It sounds like it's all roses and happiness, right? But the issue you have is there's more data coming in than most people can handle. There's literally a garden hose of data coming through, billions and billions of information. Often the data is conflicting. So how do you make a decision when one source says, it might be this gender, it might be another gender, just to be basic information. So it's important that you can bring the data in, you understand, you have the analytics not only to drive a result, but to actually do some hygiene and better understanding of the data coming in. Then the other aspect of it is several years ago, when you thought of a direct marketing program, people would sit around, they talk about creative, they would create a direct mail piece, they'd send it out a month later after creating a model or score. Things are much more real time now. Someone's just searched to your business, you need to get them information. They're on your website, you want to keep them there, you want to get them the information they need, hopefully to drive them to a shopping cart or to a discussion with a salesperson. So understanding and having that capability and the technology to actually respond to those types of requests is critical today. And it's something that 25 years ago, people weren't thinking about it. It was pre-internet.
Right, yeah. I mean, everything has changed so much because now everything is run through data. There's so much data to collect, as you said, Brad, that it's, it can feel overwhelming. And what do you do with it? Does anyone else have anything else to say or to add to the sort of the context of how much things have changed and digitized over the past few years?
I might add a little bit of color commentary, Melissa, and thanks, Brad, for the nice introduction. One of the things that we saw during the pandemic is, and I'll just use my family for example, right? My mother used to have one of those phones with the big buttons on it, and that was the extent of her technology. She did all of her shopping in bricks and mortar stores, and you couldn't go shopping. So there was this violent shove toward the future for people globally, where they had to undergo a rapid digital transformation. And now my mom gets boxes from Amazon every day, right? She does almost all of her shopping online. And we've seen research from Harris Polls and McKinsey and others that show 74% of consumers coming out of the pandemic are demanding to be recognized by their preferred brands in an omni-channel personalized fashion. And almost half of them have expressed a willingness to ditch long-standing brand loyalties in favor of new brands that recognize, acknowledge, and personalize messaging to them. Just a couple color comments to that whole concept.
No, yeah, I think that's important when we're thinking about organizations and how you can really get that fine-tuned messaging in. And I think this is a good segue to Connor. What I wanted to ask you about was the 360-degree customer profile, is really holistically understanding your customer and how you can then alter, change, and tweak your messaging to them. Can you talk to us about what a 360-degree customer profile is and how an organization can use it to their advantage?
Yeah, of course, and to build upon, Brad's point, I mean, I think I saw something the other day, and, the average auto customer looking for a new car, the amount of digital touch points they generated was in the several hundreds. So, you're talking about the volume of information coming in, even about a single interaction for a customer is huge. How do you make sense of that? I'm not going to pour through 600 lines of, everything that somebody searched for online, but that's what's great about investing in and pushing forward with a 360-degree customer view, being able to build a profile of your customer, is that it takes all of that information and you build it into a comprehensive view that encompasses all of the important information about that customer, who they are, the demographic details, and their entire journey with your company. So past, present, and then ideally, what could the future activities, what's the future look like for this customer, within your company's journey. So ideally, the goal of your 360-degree customer profile really is to create a view of your customer that details your insight gained from the data and allows you to optimize all of your interactions with the customer to maximize the business impact. And of course, as you said before, your ROI, increasingly, there's a lot of pressure to show that, your email marketing campaign or your targeted advertisement is generating revenue for the company. So I'm sure there's, plenty of questions, that's very high level. What's it really mean? So, the big thing is you want to be able to integrate all of the data, that you can find on your customer, within your company, of course. So you're going to have a huge amount of data on all of the interactions with your customer, and you're going to want to be able to take and ingest all of that data and incorporate it, and be able to reconcile it to a single customer. And you're going to want to be able to enhance that, add that demographic data, potentially from a third party, add that web activity data, and be able to merge all of that together with all your internal data, all your communications you've had with this customer. What's the tone of their emails? What's the tone, does this person interact with us on social media? To John Dodd's point, this person has never ordered from us. Now they order, a package of day. So how can you get all that information together and start to reconcile it to the customer so that you're able to track and trace all of the interactions you're having with them, all of the activity they're doing, and then the great part is taking and surfacing that up into a view that you can use to generate, really powerful business impact. So the data itself is so important, and you really need to get it right. But to turn it into impact for your business, to generate that ROI, it's the insight you get off of that data. So, not just that somebody ordered, 6 packages, but, what type of packages are they ordering? What type of packages may they be interested in the future? You want to look at taking this and understanding how customers are interacting with your company, and then turn that into information that you can use to generate more and better interactions in the future. Start to understand the true value of your customer over the lifetime of their interaction with your business, and even start to generate potential actions that you can take to increase that revenue. And that gets back to improving and pushing forward on marketing campaigns that are like John Dodd said, personalized and targeted, that play on the values and the types of interactions that customer is going to respond to. So how can you really make that a customized experience for them? And so the insight you can generate and surface up is really powerful. And this has huge benefits for your business. Being able to aggregate this data, generate insight on it, and surface it into a full customer profile, 360-degree view of your customer, really enhances your customer intelligence. And that's super important for your employees at all levels of your business. You think from the interactions of your customer service reps, those who are working with customers on the phone, being able to see and understand, this customer, all right, their package is late, and they've been upset about this before. Here's a really good, even cool thing. What if you could surface up what's the next best action to ensure that customer walks away with a positive reaction from that outcome? So these are ways you can increase your real customer intelligence and support your employees in implementing that. And then yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Connor.
Yeah. And then, of course, once you've gotten all this data together, improving the quality and impact of your advanced analytics initiatives, your AI, ML initiatives that you're taking on, being able to reconcile this all and bring all this data together really helps make that successful, ensuring that things are tracked and that you have the appropriate data to support these initiatives so that you can really turn those into really powerful engines for driving, value for your business. And then, just like John Dodd had said, really customize and individualize each of your customer interactions so you can provide the best customer service you can, and that is what's going to maximize your customer loyalty.
Oh, that's amazing, Connor. Honestly, just hearing you talk about all these examples, it really puts things into perspective how far we've come in terms of marketing and being able to truly understand our customer. I mean, the fact that we can use AI and ML to understand the tone of their emails and then change our marketing campaigns, based off of that, that's truly incredible. Does anyone else have anything else that they want to mention before we kind of get into how you can create this and where you can create this and what kind of technologies and tools you need for this?
I personally love that Connor called out things like sentiment analysis, sentiment analytics, right? There's a whole host of, what we'd consider cognitive services that sort of, hide behind the scenes in a lot of these interaction points. Brad talked about sort of the garden hose or fire hose of information that's coming in, all these domains and channels and, the places this stuff is coming from. And it's not just the data. It's also sometimes the metadata or the data about the data, the intent, the sentiment, right? So there's a lot there that's both primary source and then sort of derivative. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But I love sort of the needle in the haystack, right? What does the data tell you about the customer or the prospect, right? How do you build a profile about them? But what is the hidden insight behind the data or the combination of data tell you that you couldn't have otherwise gained if you'd only looked at one source or single source, right? That sentiment analytics, the type services behind a lot of it. So yeah, I love thinking about that quite a bit. I'm glad you called that out, Connor.
Connor, you make this sound like this stuff is easy. It's really hard, isn't it? I mean, it takes a certain skill set, the right tool set, experience, expertise.
It's extremely difficult working to unify, so many various and disparate sources and line things up. I think sometimes, we analytics folks, we work so hard to present such a polished, really beautiful, like final product that, sometimes it undercuts the amount of work that goes into it, when people see, the final product without, kind of seeing how the sausage is made. They don't always, fully appreciate truly the amount of work it goes into to incorporate all these sources, to reconcile them to a single individual, to apply the analytics and insight over it, to build out the modeling, and then, to be able to do this in real time. So when a customer hits your website, be able to accurately and, appropriately send them, the correct offer or, surface a product recommendation. It's difficult, but it generates value. So it's worth it.
Yes, it does. And Connor, I can attest to how hard you work. Anytime I come to you with an idea, you're like, we can do that. I'm like, great, I love it.
Anything can be done. It's, determining how much it's worth to you, how much can we invest in this? And you can probably get it done.
Yes, I love that. Okay, Jeff, let's switch over. So we've talked a lot about how important it is to use. We've got context about how important it is to use data-driven marketing, right? And we've talked about the 360-degree profile, but without the proper tools, I think people really have no idea where to start. So can you go into detail about specific technologies that organizations need to be able to start this process?
Sure, yeah, and you touched on that right at the end, when you were talking to Connor about, how, John's point, how hard it can be to do some of this stuff, or your point about, it seems like it can be so easy because you always have the answer is always yes, and Connor's response is, well, how much is it worth to solve a given problem, right? And I think all of the co-hosts have highlighted the importance of understanding, the volume of data we're talking about, the importance of real-time interaction and recommendation, engines, multi-source on the ingress side, right? All these different, places the information is coming from and the value of that, but also multi-domain and multi-channel on the egress side. What do we do with the data? Where does it go? How does it improve the customer interaction? And then all of it being personalized and targeted at scale. Right, so there's a lot of tools that go into this. On the next two slides, I will talk through some of the technologies, some of the hidden engineering, so to speak, behind the scenes, and the applicability of technology to solve the problems that we've been talking about today. There is no shortage of technologies in the stack, so to speak, for delivering data and analytics and ultimately marketing and customer engagement. But the headline is, we're trying to use data as a source of truth. Connor touched on this, but in order to maximize the ROI of data and analytics, your data platform needs to support your business use case, right? Understanding the business use case first, not the technology first, is really the most important thing. So the data platform of your choosing has to be able to instantly capture customer information, generate next best action, or some other insights to maximize the interaction with the customers at the time and place of their choosing, to effectively store information, serve historical data, support management, planning, strategy of the business, all these things. Brad, Connor, and John spoke about the importance of all this. So, here at Infuse Innovations, we deploy technologies from Redpoint. We deploy technologies as a Microsoft Gold partner, of course, from Microsoft. But ultimately, our focus is on delivering value using an ecosystem of tools, the right tool at the right time for the right use case. There's tools on Amazon, there's tools on Google, there's many open source options. The point is, flexible deployment options matter because the customer outcomes sometimes are different, right? Different customers solving different problems with different tools. We like tools where solutions can be integrated into a corporate governance model. We're a big sort of security first shop. We talk about that a lot in a lot of our other webinars. A good corporate governance model around the sensitivity of some of this data is really, really important. right? There's things, we've all heard of GDPR, we've heard of all these, different data privacy regulations. There's a huge importance around having a governance model around the data, and I'll touch on that when we get down to the discover and governance, portion of the slide. But being able to take all of these interactions, use them as both a valuable source of truth for an organization, but then all of the use of the data and log that into its own governance framework is really, really important. And, I have Redpoint up here, and John's here, from Redpoint. We've been using Redpoint, for the better part of, I guess, longer than a decade, because the tools are so well, they're so well designed to really follow this pipeline that we're showing of, sort of ingest, store, process, prep, train, and then serve and operationalize the data sort of in flight. And, so I'll talk through all that. So first off, ingest. Any tool has to be able to capture and load data from a huge variety of sources, right? That includes streaming sources, unstructured sources, relational databases, service-based data sources within your organization, line of business apps, third-party APIs. There's so much that goes into this, because if you don't get the right data in, and as much of it as possible, then your insights are only half-baked, right? Because you're not capturing all the intelligence across all the different data sources. Now, these data sources have to be stored, ingested and stored. So you have to be able to take these sources and then use them to support all of the related business use cases that you want to be able to use. Those business use cases could be, real-time interactions. That could be machine learning models. It could be analytics and KPIs and dashboards. It could be better serving the customer service team so they can respond to customer inquiries as they come in. It could be looking at the intent behind the communication, the sentiment analytics, of the conversation. We have to be able to transform these data sources, and there's a lot of tools to do that. We love RPDM, the Redpoint Data Management tool, but there's many tools that we use here at Infuse, depending on the customer use case, to transform that data. It's cleansing, it's effectively changing the data to have some sort of business value. And that may also mean sort of operationalizing the data, as you see here, to look across data sources and create that 360-degree view that we talked about earlier. Operationalizing the data means taking these data sources and figuring out what use cases allow us to build those best recommendations for the customer in real time, or analyzing email messaging to maximize impact of a campaign, or customizing a web journey for a visitor that might drop onto your website to best understand what they might be looking for before maybe they have made a decision about what they might be looking for in some cases. But then governing all of this, right? Whether it's using Purview or some other model, being able to understand sort of what data exists in our sort of master data model across the organization, and then governing the access to the right people at the right time with the right governance related to, industry or jurisdiction or whatever it might be. What we show on this slide really sort of talks about one of the possible flows. Different organizations are at different maturity levels of, I think, implementing different pieces of this. So one organization might want sort of a more delivered black box, so to speak, where you map your sources on the inside, on the ingress side, and then you sort of define your KPIs and your outcomes and stuff on the other side, your campaigns, et cetera, with a little bit more mystery in the middle, because you're in a different place on your maturity sort of curve. Others want to know, to Connor's point, how the sausage is made and how to tweak all of those individual elements as well. So these might be the technologies that enable data-driven decisions, but there's also technologies that enable customer insights, which I think is sort of the what are we driving outcomes for, right? So taking those technologies I talked about and showed on the previous slide and using them in a focused way to curate that 360-degree customer view, that allows business value to actually be unlocked, right? So it's sort of the where do we start, how do we get there, and then what do we do with it, I think, piece of the conversation. On this slide, I really love this flow: data, unification, insight, and action. Or sort of more colloquially, you could say data, how does it become information? And then how does that information drive intelligence, right? Sort of a really, streamlined way of thinking about it. But we want to build dashboards. We want to build automations. We want to deploy processes. We want to have campaigns that are valuable. We want the business to become data-driven. So depending, as I said, depending on customer need or maturity, aspects of the tech stack, we might deploy elements of the Redpoint stack, elements of the Microsoft stack, and all of those, generally interoperate really well together, which is really, I think, valuable. We have customers that use the entire RG1 stack. We have customers that use the entire Microsoft stack, and then customers that sort of walk the line between them. Various capabilities in each side have benefits to different organizations with different journeys. But the overall goal with these technologies is to develop and enable customer insights that are actionable and that are useful to a given business and business use case.
Absolutely. There's no point in, having all of this technology if you're not able to use it for your business and find some ROI. Anyone else have any thoughts that they'd like to add?
I would just say, Jeff, I really, really agree with your assessment that the place to start is with business outcomes. What are you trying to achieve? And I really value partnering with companies like Infused Innovations that are advising clients to look 2, 3, 4, 5 years out on their roadmap on what is your current set of key business cases and what new business cases are you going to need to embrace in order to not just stay alive in business, but to really prosper and compete successfully, rather than starting at the level of tools and utilities that you might see as 200 line items in an RFP. Let's look at what we're trying to accomplish that's going to drive value, and then let the tools and utilities be secondary to that.
Yeah, I have to second John Dodd, and not to be the third person to jump on this bandwagon, but it is such an important point when you look at the businesses that are able to generate ROI on their analytics projects, because you saw that slide before. How many technologies were on there, and they're not cheap, and it's difficult work. So if you don't have an extremely clear picture of where you're headed, you can get really lost in that mess. So you really want to be sure of what is driving the benefit of this implementation for your business, and you'll be able to see success with it.
Yeah. And I read this stat. I think, Cam, I know you're on here. You can attest to this stat about how businesses, even who are in the Fortune 5,000 list, what was the stat that how many of them didn't even survive?
Since 1955, out of the Fortune 500 list, only 11% of the companies are still around. So there's 54 companies that are still around from the 1955 Fortune 500 list.
Which is, point is, if you're not able to find ways to help your business continue to thrive and survive based on what is working and what customers do want and what they do enjoy and value and need, then your company is going to, struggle. Brendan did ask, what is the business value of digital media marketing services like Facebook, Instagram for business, Google Ads, et cetera, et cetera? Where might they fit in the concepts already discussed? Well, I would argue that you could get a very clear picture of what it is that your audience is interested in, and then focus and target on that specific content. You can create whole campaigns surrounding the things that your audience is interested in, and you can look at your sales, like what are people buying, and make sure that you're focusing on that. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? Or
Brad touched on this a bit too, and when you talk about lead gen and demand gen, channels to go direct to your customer and get insight into what they might be looking for, searching for, or curious about, or talking about, are really important. But they're also just one piece on the front end. On the Ingress side, they're just one piece of data that helps build a more complete customer picture. But then on the Ingress side, they're also a channel by which to find additional prospects or engage with customers. So it's sort of, a lot of these technologies, it's not one or the other, right? It's not, do I use it as a source of data about my customer, or do I use it as a source of delivery to my customer? They're really becoming these sort of, global 360-degree presences of themselves, because it's on the front end and it's on the back end. Brad, I know you've talked about this before in the past, and I know, John Dodd, I know that, when you guys talk about the RG1 stack and sort of all the connectors that exist, looking at social, looking at all these different capabilities, it's so important, again, both on an ingress side and then on a delivery side. I'd love to get either of your two perspectives on that.
Well, I think the one value that you have on the social media side of things is you very high confidence that you have that one-on-one communication. Sometimes with display and some other types of campaigns, you could be reaching not necessarily that person. Might be a household, it might be some tighter geographic, but I do think there's a combination of using the intelligence coming out of the social media, because they have demographics, they have some information too that could help on the prospecting side. But it's when you talk about digital marketing now, it's a combination of display ads, search, social media, and you really have to determine what you're looking at, and it's not always next best move for your customer. It's finding that next customer that looks like your customers, right? So leveraging that type of analytics for prospecting is critically important.
Yeah, and Jeff, I liked how you went straight to your chart in the upper left of the screen, where yes, digital data streaming in one record at a time in real time is a set of ingestion sources, along with batch data coming from data lakes and data warehouses and so forth. But those data points also inform and advise the unification and the insights, so that next best action models, a very common next best action model isn't, gosh, what product or offer should I serve up to this person? It's which channel should I be communicating with them? Right. And we think of it as, statistical magic, right? To somehow quantify the very best channel, when it's just common sense, right? Anybody who's ever been a salesperson learns which channel their customers like to be communicated through, right? It's the same thing, but done at scale and using modern AI, ML insights.
I like that it's done at scale, because there's a lot of different ways to understand what your customers enjoy, right? Like what they're engaging with, what's working, what they're interacting with, but being able to see it at scale, I think, is really important, because then you're able to make those important decisions. John, I want to ask you, we've talked a lot about like the technologies, the context behind it all. We've talked about the 360-degree view of the customer, but I feel like the one piece that we're missing here is a clear vision of how you can kind of get started and how this looks in real life, the practical uses for companies. So maybe can you talk about how organizations can get started with this, and maybe give us some ideas or real life use cases of organizations that have started to use these tools?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Jeff, if you want to, well, you did advance the slide, thank you. So as Jeff mentioned, I think everything starts with the business case. What is the company trying to accomplish? And I think it's not me thinking this. I have partnerships with companies like Infused Innovations across the globe. Some of them are, India-based systems integration companies. Some of them are large household name consulting firms like Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And almost all of them start with a MarTech assessment. This is a short, inexpensive consulting engagement with a company like Infused Innovations that takes stock of your current ecosystem. Are you an Azure shop, an AWS shop? Are you on-premise? Are you in GCP, Google Cloud Platform? Where is your data? Where does it sit now? What are the data ingestion sources? What are the batch files? How big are they? How many columns wide are they? How old are they? What are the streaming sources? Are they structured, unstructured, first party, third party? They ask all of these questions, and it's really kind of like a newspaper reporter going in and interviewing key technology, marketing, and operations folks to take stock of the current state of where you are and where you're going. And the culmination of that will typically be a phase 2 advisory engagement. And like I said, those initial MarTech assessments can be relatively brief, 4 to 6 weeks, and relatively inexpensive to take stock of where you are. The next step, I think, is a CDP platform discovery, where you're taking that data that you uncovered during the MarTech assessment. You start looking at source to target mapping in the customer data integration. You start looking at preferred architecture and infrastructure and potential software platforms. Often that will go to an RFP or an RFI. And sometimes my preference as one of those potential software providers is that not so much that they would single source Redpoint as the solution provider, but limit it to based on that assessment done by Infused Innovations, bring in 2 or 3 solution providers that are likely to be a really good fit for solving these business use cases, and then let them enter into a bake-off. And those might include proofs of concept, where you're either using live data or mock-up data, creative examples that are feeding into omni-channel journey orchestrations. But the bottom line is to actually see the applications and how they compare to one another, get some preliminary pricing so you know what you're looking at in terms of budget, and then make a selection. Now, once that selection is made, me personally and my company collectively are huge advocates of the MVP, the minimum viable product or the minimum viable platform, as a way of achieving very rapid speed to value. We think of it as think big, start small, and scale fast. So we take it through a series of, a phased agile approach. You might think of it as crawl, walk, run, where we assemble the data, we consolidate the data, we activate the data, and we analyze the results. Then we get a little bit bigger. We assemble more data, we activate more use cases, we analyze the results of that, and then we roll it out to an enterprise deployment where we assemble all the data, we activate all the use cases, and we analyze all those results, keeping our fingers on the pulse of KPIs like ROI, P&L, and gross response performance, net response performance by channel. Whatever KPIs are important to you, those are baked into that crawl, walk, run initiative. Any questions about that? I know I sort of skirted through it relatively quickly.
Well, just to highlight one thing you said, John, the importance of sort of understanding the business use case and then, finding a quick speed to value sort of way of implementing something. I'll highlight that as something that, while it shouldn't be unique in the industry, I really do feel like there's a lot of ambiguity from other providers. One of the reasons we really like the tools and working with you and the team is because you follow the same philosophical approach that we do in this way. I can't tell you how many, and I'm using air quotes here for anyone who can't see me, competitors that are in the industry that say, yeah, we do all this stuff, right? No problem, right? It's easy, we make it seem so easy. But ultimately, they abstract out so many of the important prerequisites, especially on the data hygiene, data cleansing, and data integration side, that, yeah, there's a lot of competitors out there that can deliver an advertisement via a channel or a couple of ads to the right person at the right time. But the insights and the value of those insights are gleaned from having a great 360-degree view, which means a lot of data work, a lot of understanding of the data, importance of the data to be able to drive those business outcomes. So, I really love that you talk about the crawl, walk, run, because you're trying to find something to solve, and then you're doing iterative, continuous improvement on that concept, but actually baking off something that's tangible to the customer rather than just theoretical. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's one of the things that, again, good philosophical alignment on that is so important.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough, John talked about the KPI piece, understanding the metrics you're going to be judging your engagement by and getting consensus on that ahead of time is huge, because you don't want to be implementing and then trying to figure out, well, was it a success? So really focusing on that, experiment, analyze, measure, and then adjust where necessary to ensure that you're hitting the KPIs that are necessary, which comes from starting with understanding what your business use case is.
Well
Right.
said, Connor.
Right. And figuring out where to spend the money and the time and the energy, because sometimes the time and the energy is more than the money, right? It looks like there are no other questions. So one thing I want to note is that if you're watching this and it feels overwhelming, it's a lot of information. That's why we exist. We're a partner here. We're happy to help you. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. We obviously have a dedicated, awesome team who just knows this stuff inside and out. I want to thank the presenters today. So Brad, Connor, Jeff, and John. We appreciate you. I also appreciate all the attendees for coming to our February webinar this month. Again, we're always here if you have questions. Next month is going to be really exciting. We're diving into protecting sensitive data. And as mentioned before, we love talking about cybersecurity, so that's going to be a fun one. So stay tuned for more information on that. And I hope you all have a lovely day. Thanks for tuning in, and we are always here if you need us.